Hello, and welcome to this episode of Five Alarm Task Force as we're in our 10th season. And it's important to note that for a couple of reasons. Number one, our guest today became a friend just after a few months we started. We're not even a friend yet. They were voting our podcast, Five Alarm Task Force, for award at the Webby Awards or whatever it was called. But this gentleman and his wife were great supporters. He has become a friend. The families we've never met, but we are as close as if we live next door to each other. However, before we start that, I will have to share with you the fact that because of my health, uh, I'm going to have to back off and close Five Alarm Task Force. We're going to do this episode and two more. I can tell you that our plan is next guest will be Assistant Chief Jacob Johnson. And I'm thinking about a couple of surprise guests that might be good at the end. But in the meantime, let me tell you who our guest is today. And this is EJ Henninger. If you've been at some of the his presentations up in the greater Philadelphia, that whole great wide circle, make it nice and wide, where he's taught his programs about learning as firefighters, learning more about where we are when we're facing and what that can affect us, how it could affect us. And EJ has been there. I've watched him grow from just a couple of drawings to now a full presentation. And he is the mission leader for building Firefighter Development, a grassroots effort to educate the fire service about building systems from an engineering perspective. He has more than 25 years of professional experience in the engineering and design of fire protection, plumbing, and process systems for numerous types and occupancies. For 15 years, EJ has served as a volunteer firefighter with a rural fire and rescue company, holding various positions. He is a proponent for the right against firefighter cancer. EJ is happily married to his beautiful wife of more than 25 years and has three wonderful sons. My friend, my colleague, my brother, EJ Henninger, welcome back to Five Alarm Task Force.
No, thanks for having me. It's great to be back chatting with you again.
Yeah, and we have a very interesting, we were talking about this last week, and we came up with a great title, and it's very simple. Things you may not know. That could be very helpful to keeping you safe, keeping you from danger, or might be just a little better way of looking at a situation and what to do with it. So, EJ, let's go back to when you first started building firefighter development. I think that was the last time you were on the podcast. And why don't you tell our viewers and listeners just what your goal was at that time and how it's kind of really grown like ivy up the walls
Yeah, well,
today.
honestly, this whole endeavor started. Um, I was just noticing when we were out on calls or doing, pre-planned walkthroughs or whatnot, um, that there's just a general lack of understanding of building systems. HVAC, electrical, plumbing, things of that nature. And I started keeping notes of stuff I noticed. And my original plan was to just try and schedule a drill night where we could get some type of building, be it an office building or what have you, that had a lot of these systems in it that I'd noticed some, miscommunication or misunderstanding. And we would just go through the building and walk through and talk about building systems and,
Right.
what different pieces of equipment are, how to recognize them, what they do, if there's hazards associated with them. And, I had this list and I'd been working on, putting together this drill night. And at some point along the lines, you and I had connected and, you were whispering in my ear, like, hey, you take all these notes, that's probably worthy of an article. Like you should take this information and get it out there. Um, which I didn't dismiss. Um, but it also took another um, person that we both know, John Haywick, have a meeting. John and I connected with John because of hearing him on your podcast, and I wanted to follow up because I was working on another project at the firehouse, and I wanted his opinion because I heard him and he sounded like he had a very good background. I liked his mindset. And John said, "Hey, when he asked me what I did for a living, I said I work for an engineering company." And he said, you got to do something with this. He said, your dual perspective is unique and it could be beneficial. And that was what kind of pushed me over the edge from your nudging. Um, so I decided to make it a little more formal. I took my notes. I wrote an article that you proofread for me and gave me some positive feedback. So thank you very much.
Always a
Uh,
pleasure.
got it published. It seemed like it didn't set the world on fire, but it seemed like it was well received. And it just kept growing from there. I decided to take the article and started building out a presentation uh, and submitting to, various conferences as they came up and, putting it out there to go to local departments if they wanted to listen to me ramble on for a couple hours. And it's just been, I don't know if I want to say growing, again, we're still not setting the world on fire. I'm just kind of doing my thing, enjoying it. I have I've gotten to one conference. I've got another one coming up. I've hit a handful of departments or like county organizations throughout the years. And the information in the presentations just keeps growing as as I stumble on new systems or I realize that there's new technologies or hazards or um, what have you. Just keep building to the project and posting on social media and trying to keep out there and spread the knowledge.
And it's been successful uh, because of the vast knowledge that you bring to this, which really at the beginning, even when we first met back in 2016, when I got those votes, I got a lot of votes from one address. But I'm glad that happened because it brought us together. And again, I'm so happy to say that in the nearly 10 years that we've been doing the podcast, I've made so many friends that I've never met in person, but I've made so many friends in the fire service. I was very lucky to have had the opportunity to interview the late Chief Ellen Brunacini, may rest in peace. Uh, I had uh, others, captains, lieutenants, firefighters, chiefs of department, Cal Fire from the West Coast, Orange County, uh, and like I said, the people from Cal Fire, which really is the entire state. If you look at the map, it goes from its northern border all the way down to the southern border, and I think that I've hoped that we, in our podcast, we have brought new information to our viewers and listeners. We started the audio back in 2016. And then in 2020, when the COVID pandemic broke out, we moved to video using Zoom. I actually used Zoom for the first time in April of 2020 when one of our daughters, was still up north for the Jewish holidays for Passover. And I had to share the service that we did in our home with that friend doing Zoom. And then as we were eating, after the service part was done and we're eating dinner, I started thinking, well, wait a second. If I can do this for this little dinner, Why can't I do it for the class that I teach to senior adults about how to read our scrolls, the Torah? And then I said, I could do this for podcasts. And that was a long growth. But the people I've had have been worth all the sweat and and worry. Uh, but when I really was in a bind, I would reach out to EJ because we have no politics between us. We're not in competing departments or anything like that. Uh, when he first signed on and uh, wrote to me an email, I was just kind of liked the way it was phrased. And even though it was a little bit fun because they wanted me to enter this uh, podcast contest, I started seeing some ways that with EJ's encouragements and some ideas that I could make it into both a video standard, and that you'll find those on our podcasts. The videos are on our YouTube channel. We have two channels there. One is much shorter, but the one you want to look for is the one under the name Five Alarm Task Force Corp. And you can see the videos from there. So EJ just became a friend because all of a sudden we started corresponding, not just for podcast contests. We started talking about fire stuff. And he's like the generation after mine. I went in 77 and had to leave in 85 after an injury. But the fact is that we taught a lot about the same things. I was in two volunteer departments, one in outside Greensboro, North Carolina, and one outside Syracuse, New York. And we didn't even have vacutainers in those days. Okay, it was everything was manual, and we didn't have the protections just for starting an IV then that we have today. Today we wear gloves for everything. In my day, we wore gloves basically for recoveries. We didn't wear them other than our firefighting gloves. But thanks to EJ, I started learning more about what was going on through his explanations in my time and how those have changed. And that was it. I was hooked. This guy knew a lot of the stuff that would come right after my time. And we just talked about that frequently. Or we just call and check in with each other, see how we're doing, how our families are doing, etc. Yep. And they've kind of grown over the last 10 years. You know, a lot of things have happened.
Yeah.
Your three kids have finished college and are in the working world. One of our daughters got married, and we have our first grandchild, who's a little Vance himself, a little 5-year-old Vance who thinks he's 15 years old. But he loves coming into the studio here and talking and seeing who I'm talking with, and always has to say, hi. So that's the stuff we knew. But as we talked last week on the phone, you came up with this great idea of things you may not know for our brothers and sisters out there. And some of them could be just fire, or some of them could be maybe twisted to EMS. Maybe some of the things that we'll talk about could be good for law enforcement as well. No matter what branch of first responders you're in, you're doing a great job for this country and the people in your communities that you protect. So don't let anybody tell you that volunteer departments or part pay departments aren't any good. You have to be career. Considering the fact that still nearly 3/4 of the firefighters in the country are volunteers or paid on call. The rest are our career-minded brothers and sisters. So let's start with a simple one. What's something that our audience may not know?
Yeah, so when we were talking about this last week and coming up with ideas, there's been a handful of uh, systems or items that I've noticed over the years that are either uncommon. I tend to be exposed to them because of work, not necessarily on the fire side. The bulk of my career has been spent engineering systems for pharmaceutical and biotech clients. So, we see a lot of wild stuff. Um, so I have that, but I've also noticed some of this stuff is creeping into regular day life and, regular communities. Um, on the suppression side, one of the things that I don't think people see too often are clean agent suppression systems, right? These are the gaseous type. They're waterless, and they're not predominant. You don't see them very often, but when they're there, they're protecting something that's very important to somebody. And I said the fire ground is not the place to learn about something. That's not when you want to try and figure this out, right? So, like I said, clean agents, I guess the easiest way to explain them is they're kind of like a big fire extinguisher. They're waterless, they're gas-based. Um, they're all about putting out the fire without putting the space out of service. So they're going to be protecting high value mission critical areas like data centers, telecom rooms, historical archives, labs. You know, from our fireground perspective, knowing a clean agent system is there tells you a lot about the occupancy, the hazard, and what you might expect on arrival. Um, as I said, they're waterless. They use a gas. There's multiple types of gases that have been introduced over the years. They started with halon, um, and they've moved through a few different types, mostly because the feds keep either mostly the feds are banning them because of their um, environmental impact. Like they might have a high global warming potential. So the feds have been knocking some of them back. We had a major manufacturer of one of the types of clean agents decided they weren't going to make it anymore. We never really said why. Um, my opinion is that
Wait a second. The government is doing something that we don't know about. That can't happen in this country.
yeah. So like I said, yeah. So they've banned a couple agents over the years. But like the said either halon. The most recent ones were refrigerant style ones. So, that was done more because that type of refrigerant was prevalent throughout the HVAC industry. From a fire suppression standpoint, it was very minute percentage of what's out there, but kind of became collateral damage. There's a major manufacturer, I won't name the name, that made one of the other clean agents, and it came out that there's PFAS in the agent. Now, but yeah, it's kind of like the same thing with the gear and
Yep.
the good fight that the cotters are fighting. You never get real information. So, you know, was it a hazard? Hard to say. Was there PFAS? Yes. But, when this discharges, what are the levels of PFAS? You're not talking great concentrations. You have the ability to, if you in the environment and the clean agent is still there, you can be on your SCBA, you can ventilate. Um, so I don't know that it posed the same risk. The company never said why they stopped making it. I think it was more of a marketing thing. Because as you know, the word PFAS has become uglier and uglier as the years go by.
As it should be.
Yep. And I honestly thought they did it so that they could turn around and announce some new clean agent that they could market and say we're PFAS free and take off. And that never happened. So, I think they just decided to cut their losses and being scared of PFAS and moved on. It's still out there. There's other people that make it. Um, and we still specify it. Like I said, we don't see it as a risk because it's not super high concentrations. It's not like it's constant, like the year. It's in your year. Every time you're wearing your year, you're getting microdosed. This is a system that, you know, as long as you never have a problem, it's never going to discharge. So the likelihood of the exposure is very low. And like I said, you can ventilate, wear your SCBA and protect yourself. Um, so that's kind of how the systems have been evolving. Um, so in plain language, these things are a system that's going to knock down a fire fast, but doesn't damage equipment or contents in the room. And as I said, you're going to see these where you have high value consequences, either because the items inside are extremely valuable or because the equipment is critical to business continuity. So think data centers, telecom rooms, archives, museums, places where water would cause more harm than the fire itself. That's kind of what we're looking at. Um, one of the advantages that these systems have is that they can extinguish fires that a standard sprinkler might not because of obstructions. If you've ever seen a data center, think about all the server racks and the cabinets.
Yeah.
You're not going to get water inside those cabinets versus the gas. It can push through cabinet openings. It can push itself around in between the cabinets. It's going to get where water could be blocked. Um,
And there's less chance of damage to the equipment because you're using the gas only.
you stole my next point.
Oh, sorry.
No, 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 no. It's fine, but that's exactly it. That's the point. Yeah, they're going to dramatically reduce your damage from smoke and water, which is huge because you're either avoiding damaged equipment, which could bring a business down. You're protecting valuable documents, or what have you. So yeah, that's the key point to these things. Um, they all work for or work off of different reasons, depending on how it works. So there are inert agents, which are basically just an inert gas. They smother fires. They push the oxygen out, right? They choke it off. There's a couple that um, work off of primarily heat absorption, right? So it kind of gets atomized and just sucks up all the heat, cools everything down, takes the heat out of that, fire triangle or fire tetrahedron. Um, and there's a third one that also works through heat absorption, but it also works through disrupting the combustion reaction. That fourth part when you get from the fire triangle to the fire tetrahedron. So, you know, as I said, anytime we're dealing with clean agent, it means the room contains something delicate or expensive or irreplaceable. So one of the first things is just finding these places, right? If you know early on that a room is protected by a clean agent, you can start thinking about how you're going to access it. What's going to be your ventilation procedure? Um, how the system interacts with your operations. A great way to understand a lot of this after you find where these systems are, especially if they haven't been built yet. Um, Typically, when the installation is done, there's going to be some type of commissioning process. It's going to be validated or checked to make sure that everything is there and everything works as it should. So if you can be there as a firefighter to see that process, it's a good chance you're going to have the system installer, possibly the engineer. You're going to have building personnel there, and you'll be able to get the big picture. You're going to be able to, you have all the right people in the right room to understand all the different components, how they interact, what your job is going to be, um, and how you fit into that puzzle. to dealing with these systems.
And you can do
Um,
that without being a certified engineer. These are
oh,
things you can pick up
absolutely.
as a firefighter and put that, discuss it with your officers and your chiefs, and let them say, let you tell them that you have this knowledge about this particular thing. You have a couple of them in your district that you cover. Learn, take from this, and do more to learn about it if you're interested in it. And that way, then you come up and raise your hand when somebody says about this or that. You're going to have that knowledge to share with your colleagues.
You know, so I'm going through some of my slides. So, is kind of like cues of things I want to talk about.
All right.
Um,
Let's do some
so
ones
like
that
it's,
are good kickers. We want to kick them in the butt a little bit and make them
yeah.
think.
So like I said, the systems are basically like a big extinguisher. There's going to be a tank with an agent. Um, there's going to be a control panel for it. A lot of times, there's some type of I like to provide panels outside of spaces with what we call a graphical interface. So it'll show a room layout. It'll show where your nozzles are that discharge the clean agent. It'll show your detector locations, and hopefully, like which detector is going off. Um, so you're going to have this storage cylinder. It's high pressure, so just beware that the way they're piped. They want everything to disperse evenly throughout the space, so all the piping network is completely symmetrical. So you get the same pressure and the same volume of discharge at every outlet in the space. Detection is usually done with smoke detectors. Um, so there'll be smoke detectors that'll discharge as a clean agent. Most fire marshals do not allow a space to be protected only by clean agent. And that's because it's a finite source. You have a tank. Once the tank dumps, you're done. If it doesn't control the fire, that can be a problem. So many times what we do is we'll design a pre-action sprinkler system for the space as well. And we'll operate that off of heat detectors where we can control the temperature. So, if the clean agent goes, the clean agent will see smoke earlier than the heat. It's going to fire, dump, good. If for whatever reason it doesn't happen, you have your level of heat detectors at the ceiling, you have your pre-action system back up, and that's going to go off. Um, let's see what else. Sometimes the detectors aren't what you're used to, like a typical heat or smoke. There's a system, they're aspirating fire detection systems. So you'll see the plastic orange pipe that's used for residential sprinklers. They'll have that in the room and it'll have a bunch of holes drilled in it, and that'll be piped back to a pump. Um, Similar to if you think about your 5 gas meter has a little pump inside and it's drawing air in and analyzing it, and it's similar to the same thing. Um, and these pumps will detect hydrocarbons very quickly and they work very fast. So you see those. So if you see, if you're in one of these spaces and see orange pipe, that's what's going on there. Um, so that's detection operation. Um, when these things, when something is detected, if a smoke detector picks something up, um, there's going to be a horn strobe inside and a strobe outside that warns occupants about a discharge. So you'll get a warning inside that the detection has been initiated. It's going to go into a countdown to give you time to evacuate the room, and you get out of the room. And there'll also be a horn strobe outside, so you can tell from outside the room that a discharge is taking place in the space without having to enter the room to figure that out.
Right.
Uh, the systems come with abort buttons, manual pulls. Um, So if for whatever reason you see an issue and it hasn't gone out yet, as you're going out, you can do a manual dump of the system. The abort buttons are there. Say you and I are working in a space and the system discharge initiation goes in. I run to the door. Um, you decide, you know what? I can't lose this paperwork. I got to gather this stuff. So I'm standing at the door yelling at you to get your button gear and get out. I can hold the abort button, which will pause the countdown till you get to me to get to the door. And it's the abort is only operable while I would be pushing on the button. As soon as I let off, the system reinitiates.
Right.
Um, and then everything ties back to a control panel outside the room. There's requirements for signage outside there to key you in on what the different devices in or what's going on in the space. Um,
Let me bring something up
yeah.
along this line. And that is that one of the earliest lessons I received, which I kind of scoffed at myself initially back in 1978, was that I was taught that when I go into a restaurant, or I go into really any building, but especially a restaurant, that I should, once we're taken to our table, we didn't ask for a specific position, then we need to know where the next three, the closest exit is to us, and the next three. Even though we're there for dinner, as a couple, something like that, or a couple of friends just having dinner, it's very important to realize that. And now, with what you just said, we should add in that if you're going into a restaurant where there's a lot of cooking, a lot of there's what I call uh, demonstration cooking, where there's a glass partition, but you can see the chefs doing all their work and see how they using actually causing flames in certain frying pans, etc. And they all have, they're required by law in every state, some sort of uh, agent, whether it's water or one of the agents that you talked about, EJ, that we needed to know how to reach that from our wherever table we're sitting at. And it doesn't mean that you spoil your evening. You're not playing firefighter that evening, but you want to protect yourself, the people you're with, and hopefully others around you. But if you've never been exposed to these couple of things that you've brought up, you don't have that knowledge, and then the results could be a little more tragic than they had to be. Doesn't mean you have to wear your gear in the restaurant, okay? But most of the volunteers I knew always kept their gear most of the time in their vehicle. Now that was all well and good until we learned about PFAS, because my gear in '77 right through '85 in both departments were standard firefighting gear. So there was PFAS in that. We never knew what that was. The name didn't even come out to the public yet, or the fire service yet. But you need to be prepared wherever you go. If you maybe you carry a jump bag in your car because you're an EMT or paramedic and a firefighter. You might carry a couple of extinguishers in your car, a couple of big CO2, maybe in an Ansel like that. You do that because you want to be prepared. But prepared isn't just what you can hold in your hands. Prepared should be in your head and your heart. So that if you were responding to that call, what do you have to be aware of in that particular building? And I think that's something that everybody could benefit from. And that's really, to me, a very important another aspect that we have to keep intact. Most of us, we like being plain citizens, enjoying our communities, watching our kids in sports, etc., taking them to music lessons, whatever. But at the same time, most of us, not all of us, we're still, if you could do it on a screen, you would have a half of a baseball cap and half of a fire helmet, because that's kind of what most of us are when we go out in our communities. We want to do something with our families, or we're doing errands, going to the bank, going to the store for groceries and stuff. But we also have to be able to help somebody, whether it's the elderly person who trips and falls, or there's a major problem in the store along that. And it's just our nature, because of who we are, to want to be able to help and do what we can to help until the real help arrives. So I think what you brought up is very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if there is an event, and you're responding to one of these spaces, just you have to be prepared. Tactics are going to change based on what's in the space. So you need to understand what's there so you get the tactics right. You need to understand how that room is protected, if it's clean agent and pre-action or whatever the backup is. Finding the control panel early is going to be a big help. The control panel, that's your dashboard. That's going to tell you what's going on with the system and in that space. Like I said, know if you have a backup system. Um, it's probably helpful to understand the HVAC operations, right? Because the premise of these things working to suppress is based on being in a sealed room and maintaining this concentration level of agent in the space. So if you have air handling units that are providing ventilation from outside the space, the ductwork feeding that space needs to have dampers that close off automatically to isolate the room. Um, if the HVAC units are dedicated to the space and in the space, they may shut down, they may not shut down. There's different ways to do that based on how the engineer wants to design the system. Um, you want to make sure that the agent actually discharged, which you should be able to see from the outside. Again, look at your scrobes, check your control panel. Like I said, I like to do panels that have that graphic interface. You're going to have a layout of the room. So if there is a smoke or haze in there, you can still get an idea of what's in there, how it's laid out, how the room is shaped. Um, be prepared for sprinkler activation. If that didn't catch, if that clean agent didn't get it and you go in there, don't be, don't get caught off guard if a sprinkler head opens. Um, if it didn't get it, locate the fire, finish the extinguishment, or at least, make sure you don't have any, hot spots. Um, and this is really critical because, like, you say you're going in with an extinguisher and you want to make sure you eliminate any remaining hot spots. You need to use an extinguisher that's going to match the hazard, right? If it's uh, let's say it's protecting a rare books library, you don't want to go in there with a water can, right? Um, if it's electronics, maybe you go in with a CO2 extinguisher.
Yep.
So, as always, we're there to make things better, not worse. So don't contribute to the problems while you're there.
Right.
Um, um, One of the things is probably best coordinated with the facilities personnel is how you're going to ventilate the space. A lot of times these are exterior. Um, maybe you can use the building's HVAC system with their help to be able to pull the air out. You can reset the dampers. Maybe there's a way to exhaust the space to get it out. You can put a fan in the door and blow it out in the space. It's not that harmful and will dissipate. It's not an issue to building occupants. But again, you know, think, customer service. If you're going to do that, maybe you relocate the people. Explain to them what's going on, that there may be a cloud, but it's not scary. It's nothing you have to worry about. As always, a lot of times communication solves a lot of problems and a lot of issues.
Yeah.
So, be prepared, keep people informed, um, and, work with the building, try and get those systems reset as quick as possible so that they can get back to work, and then you're not walking away from an unprotected space as well.
Right. Right.
Um,
All right, so we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we'll talk about a few other things that you may not know about. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to this episode of Five Alum Task Force. Really glad to have you with us, and we're very happy that we are broadcasting our podcast once again. And our guest is EJ Henninger. The name of his company, because I thought uh, building Firefighter Development. And he started as a grassroots. But before we get back to our guest, I want to let you know that our book, uh, from not from Five Alarm Task Force Corp, but a book that my best friend, I've known him since we met in '77 in the fire department. He's still my best friend today, other than my wife. And we put this book together back in 2016, and it was sold on eBay as an ebook. And then we decided, people were doing some asking about, and we decided to have it published. And we're working with Amazon Publishing, and we should probably have the book available in towards the end of the month. I don't think it has to go into May. I think we'll have it by the end, or even earlier, maybe, from the printers. So we'll keep you advised on our website. And I also want to remind you that even though I can't do, we're coming down on the podcast itself, the corporation, the nonprofit of Five Alarm Task Force Corp, is staying. It will be here, and I'll be taking care of that along with my two terrific partners, and that's Andy Starnes of Insight Training LLC, and Nick Higgins, the co-founder of the Firehouse Tribune, now the editor of the letter of that program, and they have many other parts that are working with other departments. So keep an eye out for both the Firehouse Tribune and Insight Training. Insight Training specializes in tick training. And if you want one of the best people, I used to say in the country, I got corrected. One of the best tick examiners and teachers is Andy Starnes in the world, not just in the United States. So reach out to them. Again, keep checking our website to find out when the books are available. The prices will be there, and we'll get them out to you as soon as possible. I will say that I was very surprised to hear when the team at Amazon Publishing reached back and said how often they were laughing when they're trying to edit a book. And I think that is a nice little thumbs up. If the people who are putting it together for you like it to the point where they actually laugh at some of the jokes in there, then hopefully you're going to laugh as well.
That's
So,
pretty cool.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've gone back and forth with them. It's a little tougher than we expected, and a little bit more in investment than we expected. But we hope that everybody will like it, and they'll be happy with it. All right, so that's our little ad for our forthcoming book. And it's called Fish Out of Water, Two Jewish Guys in a Deep South Firehouse.
I'm looking forward to reading it in print because I got the e-version years ago.
Yeah,
So and I remember enjoying it. So it'd be nice to go back and read it again. It'll be cool, physical print. So I'm
yeah,
excited about that.
real physical print. Yeah, we're doing hardcovers and paperbacks will be available. All right, so that all being said, let's continue with EJ on some of the things that you may think you know, but you don't know. That sounds like it's going to be Spaceballs 3.
Yeah. Uh, Which, oh, by the way, I don't know if you saw they confirmed a spring 2027 release for the Spaceball sequel.
Oh, was that far for Spaceballs too? Yeah,
Yep.
not until next year.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of stuff on social media with Josh Gad. Of course, my kids love Josh from the Disney movies, even though they're grown women now and with families, that they still love to see that kind of comedy.
Yeah.
And Mel Brooks is a brilliant comedic uh, lead actor and
Oh, for
director
sure.
and
For
writer.
sure. Yes.
Yeah, right. All right. So let's think of something else that our listeners and viewers maybe think they know, but they may not know what they need to know.
So another thing that I've been fairly familiar with from work for a few years, but I've noticed creeping into, I don't know, how do I want to say it, general population, are things called inert gases, right? So these are gases that tend to be resistant to reacting with other elements. They don't support combustion. They're colorless, odorless, tasteless, and non-irritating under most conditions, but they can be dangerous. So the first thing is, do you have it in your first do? Do you know how to recognize the different tanks or cylinders or evaporators that these systems have? So you get that first clue that, oh, there's a hazard there. Um, Once you find it, is it in a liquid or a gas state? There are going to be very different um, hazards associated with that and how you deal with it. Um, if it's liquid, uh, which is fairly common, keeps things really cold. The bulk storage could be a tanker truck, a giant exterior tank. They have these things called dewars that are smaller, highly insulated, mobile cylinders. So it can come in all shapes and sizes. In the pharmaceutical world, it's used a lot for cell preservation. So they will keep cells in liquid nitrogen freezers to protect them. And it's also used for a very interesting process called lyophilization, which is the freeze drying of pharmaceutical products, which we won't go into, but it's pretty amazing how they've managed to make that work. Again, that's probably kind of like niche stuff, but cryosurgery has been becoming more prevalent over the past few years. Cryotherapy is becoming huge. Um, for like post workout, post injury treatment, stuff like that. Um, I know I personally haven't seen it in my first due. One of the departments that I did do a presentation for last year knows of it. They have a cryotherapy uh, location in their first due now, so hopefully we prepared them a little better. Uh, if it's gas, a lot of times. In an industrial setting, it's going to be used for like purging tanks and piping vapors and gases, especially if those vapors and gases are flammable. If you need to repair, I don't know, a natural gas line, if you get it isolated, they're going to purge it with nitrogen so that they can, if they have to do hot work on that piping. So you get all that bad stuff out. It's also common times it's used, they call it a blanket gas. So on the pharmaceutical side, again, they use it to as a blanket level over top of sensitive materials, so it's not exposed to air or other materials. Like I said, it can present all kinds of different shapes and sizes and containers, so you need to understand what they look like, be able to find them. Um, the biggest concerns when it comes to liquid nitrogen, it is extremely cold. And you can get thermal burns from it. So you're looking at prolonged exposure. You can get frostbite to deep tissue. Your eyes are very vulnerable. Um, Unprotected skin. You could stick to medical metal surfaces. So you know, like Ralphie and Christmas Story, but a heck of a lot worse. If you remember the tongue on the flagpole. Uh, The gaseous side, it's an asphyxiant. So it's going to displace oxygen. It can do it without warning, expands roughly 700% when it vaporizes from liquid to gas. Um, there's, if you have an oxygen deficient atmosphere, you may not have any visual cues, right? This is where your meter is going to be your friend. If you get a cue, it's going to be like a white vapor cloud of something that's really happening because you're having that temperature change that is affecting moisture in the air around it. So you may see it, you may not see it. It's like I said, this is where your meter is your friend. You know, the psychological effects or physiological effects of oxygen deficiency, everything changes really quickly. The first step is, your mental alertness goes and it just goes downhill from there. So if you know these systems are there, mask up, use your meters, just be smart and protect yourself. Because things can go sideways really fast and you may not be able to self-rescue. You don't want to go running into, if you see somebody down, you don't want to go, running in and make a situation worse, create another victim that's got to get dealt with.
Yeah, that's
Best,
something we want to avoid at all
yeah,
costs.
yeah. The best way to protect yourself if it's liquid, typical hazmat kind of thing, time distance separation. Don't lean over or into vessels that have the cryogenic liquids in them. If it's gas, if it's a space, uh, you know, if you have that opportunity to have input when these systems are being installed or going through the permit process, make sure there's oxygen sensors in the rooms that report to exterior alarm devices. So if you have a room with a leak that goes south, you have that external indication, you have an alarm system. You try and get ventilation systems in place so that you can restore the proper oxygen level without moving it to another area that could be more hazardous, things of that nature. Again, and this is where having that relationship with your plan reviewers and your building inspectors really pays dues. And this has been an underlying topic that I've seen surfacing more and more in my presentation over the years, and is why I decided to rebrand my program to understanding buildings and relationships for success. Because, you're not always going to see these things just driving around. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you have that working relationship with plans reviewers, they're going to find this early. And they need to understand what that impact is to you for your safety and your tactics. And they need to get that information to you. And that gives you that opportunity to provide input up front in permit review to get safety measures like oxygen sensors in these spaces. The pre-action backup on your clean agents that we talked about earlier. During construction, it allows you to be there when these systems are being installed that we talked about earlier or commissioned, so you can have that forum to talk to everybody that's been involved and understand the big picture with these systems. So those relationships are huge. You got to forge them. They got to be solid. If they're not there, you need to figure something out. I know my township, our permit review process, at least at one point, I'm not sure exactly how it works anymore, but a lot of that is done by an engineering firm that we contract with. It's not always done by, township people. And we're a rural volunteer fire department. We don't have a codes and inspections division of our department. So, it's important. People have to have eyes on this and you have to have this working relationship. So if you don't have it figured out, and get there, and you'll be a heck of a lot better off for it. One of the places that I see these inert gases popping up, and you may or may not be aware of it. Um, I happened to be going through a McDonald's drive-through one day, and as I was waiting in line, I noticed a door that had a ventilation grill on the front. It had the NFPA hazard placard on it, and this mysterious box next to it. And got very curious because I wanted to know what was going on at McDonald's that required this. And what I found out is historically, like fast food restaurants, convenience stores, to carbonate the soda, they would have a small CO2 cylinder in in the cabinets underneath. Well, you can store a heck of a lot more CO2 as a liquid in a container than you can gas. So a lot of them are converting to liquid CO2. So this room was where they have the cryogenic tank that holds liquid CO2 that they flash off to a gas, and then it's tubed over to their soda fountains and puts the bubbles in your drink. Um, I won't name the fast food restaurant, but over history, they had three incidents with multiple fatalities from CO2 leaks. It's been quite some time since that happened, so I like to think that people have gotten smarter, systems have gotten smarter, and things are safer because you don't see or hear about it anymore. Um, but it's out there, it's a hazard. Think about, like I said, this stuff expands 700%. I actually found one. We have a convenience store next to our firehouse, and I'm walking over from the firehouse because we're right next door. I happened to be stopping one time while I was out driving around, and I pulled in the parking lot and parked on the side I'm never there. And as I parked and I looked up and I saw one of these cylinders sitting outside the space. That cylinder going from liquid to gas, if full, could easily displace the oxygen in the entire store. Now, in theory, is that an actual reality? Hard to say. You have a lot of leak points, there's ventilation, there's air moving. But if that leak happens in a small janitor's closet or a toilet room, it's going to be a lot easier to fill. And I'm thinking about we're in there hooking ceilings. You grab this tubing and pull it. The tubing gets damaged from a fire, right? But I also say this in every one of my presentations sarcastically, but we're safe, right? Just because it's overhaul doesn't mean we're all still not wearing SCBA. We're all carrying our meters, right? We're all doing everything the right way, right? So we're safe. Just kind of drive that point home. We can't relax. It first of all, and you and I have had this discussion about cancer. Like, take it seriously. Don't be don't be the tough guy. Don't try and be the smoke eater. Protect yourself, right? And this kind of follows the same suit. Um, yeah. So it's just one more reason uh, to be safe. Find these systems, know where they are because they're dangerous and they're out there. And once you see one, it's kind of like it seems like I don't know, like a new car comes out or something like that, and all of a sudden you see one, or you just happen to see something, some random type car, and once you see it, all of a sudden you're seeing it all over the place. It's the same thing. Once you know what to look for with these CO2 systems, they are everywhere. And like I said, they're a hazard, and you got to know how to deal with them too. You, these cylinders are pressurized. You can't just go closing all the valves on the container to make it safe. If you close a relief valve, the pressure is going to build. Now you have a bomb on your hands. I think these things should be identified in a 360. So hopefully we're all doing our 360s. If you see it, uh, announce it on the air, make sure it's there. If you can isolate it, great. But be smart about doing it. Make sure you know what you're doing if you decide to close a valve. If you don't know what you're doing, don't close everything. That's going to create a problem. Worst case, maybe just assign somebody to stand there and monitor the tank. If you see it starting to form ice on the outside, it's probably moving a lot of gas. You think about when you're sucking air down really fast and your SCBA in your bottle gets cold, it's the same kind of theory. As you have that pressure change, you're going to have that temperature change. So if you see frost starting to form on the head of the tank or a valve, chances are that piping's been compromised, and you're flowing a lot. So, but like I said, they will become a bomb if you just completely isolate everything because there's safety measures on top of the tanks, and the tank heads are very elaborate. There's just tons of valves everywhere. So be safe. One of the things I would say to advocate for is having that the tubing, if it's something that can easily be damaged, have it run in some type of a conduit, like maybe a plastic pipe to protect the soft tubing, help save it from damage. I think that would go a long way. Again, um, have your monitoring, your ventilation systems in place in the spaces where these tanks are. If you're responding to something, they have trucks that show up and fill these. The McDonald's I saw that had this mysterious box, it was actually the liquid fill station. So the truck shows up with liquid CO2. They have a hose that connects to it. You have to be careful if you show up and you see that truck there and a guy laying down on the ground. Again, don't rush in. There could be a hazardous environment
Yep.
immediately around him. Uh, trying
Call
to think, trying,
911 right there.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but like some of the other places, uh, maybe these are it. You might see different types of CO2. Um, maybe you have not necessarily a convenience store or fast food restaurant, but maybe you have, um, uh, like a lot of, microbrews have become really popular over the last few years. If they have a bunch of taps, they might have a pretty elaborate CO2 system in the back that's storing a lot. Dry ice is solid CO2. I'm not exactly sure where you'd be seeing it, but that's technically what that is.
You see that in doctor's offices as well. It's,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh
So,
yeah, 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 yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, just like with the gaseous nitrogen, if the exposure is going to progress fast and fairly quietly, so you need to recognize those signs, get victims out into clean air, get them on oxygen right away. You're and for yourself, like I said, your mental capacity is going to drop quickly, so you might not be able to self rescue. So keep that in mind as you're working around those systems. I'm strolling through some stuff to see if anything else kind of trips that I didn't talk about. I think it's pretty much the big stuff. But yeah, like I said, I didn't realize it was out there. I noticed it a few years ago and just progressively kept seeing it and realized how prominent it is. It's actually been around longer than I realized. Just I don't know. I don't know if I haven't noticed it or what the deal is, but it's been around for a while. Seems to me it's been more prevalent. And it's very likely that everybody has this in their first due at this point if you have a fast food restaurant or a convenience store at the least.
If you have a big supermarket, like we have several right around us, um, and I don't get there that often anymore again, but when I'm there, I'm always keeping my head on a swivel, making sure, nobody's falling in the aisle, stuff like that. Um, and I always look at the FDC where it is
Yeah,
even if I go around the back of the building. You're the one who really brought me even better into FDCs because we really only had a few back in my day, but now we see them all over the place, which is great. Even the firehouse right down the street from us has a connection for the firehouse that
yeah,
goes to feed the sprinkler system.
yep,
So right outside on the tarmac, they can put the engine there, put the 5-inch line into the receiver, and boom, they have water going through the sprinkler system in the firehouse. But I
yep,
think that while it's nice to get out of the uniform and just relax and be a normal human every once in a while, most of us will say, I believe, and this is from people I've met, especially not just during my career, but Um, Even since they're, because I visit as many firehouses as I can, talk to people about how things are done. And it's important to know that no matter where you go now, you just might have to change your change your cape, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you might be wearing a hoodie shirt, shirt, and a pair of athletic shorts. But if you're a first responder, um, and you see something that is within your purview of knowledge for your field, then you're probably going to do it to help, because that's the business we're in. We're in the business of help, no matter where firefighters, law enforcement, or EMS people. That's our job. They put the bag, instead of a license plate, we get a little label that says helper. You know, um, like I said, we've talked about this before, but uh, I had to give up active firefighting in '85 when I got injured, and yet my daughters, my two daughters, and my wife say that it's probably I've probably stopped somewhere between 200 and 300 times, just while I was driving the car in the neighborhood. I'm in a store, I'm driving, and something happened, uh, and I just do it. I have the stuff. I have the safety vest. I have a complete BLS kit. I have ropes, gloves, um, everything basically I would need to start with, and then hopefully people come in and help. But for me, it's who I am. I might have this strange autoimmune disorder, but I still say once a firefighter, always a firefighter.
No, and I've said it talking with, guys like Nick. You can take Steve out of the fire service, but you can't take the fire service out of Steve.
You know, it's I guess it started when I was a little kid and fell in love, and it's in the book. I fell in love with beacon lights, the rotating lights when they first came out, the little bubble guns.
Yeah.
Um, and they started with two, and then Federal came out with the three with one up. I don't know. I mean, were they trying to avoid a plane coming in and landing on the fireground? I mean, didn't understand that one. But I think that as whether we're active firefighters or retired firefighters, I think we always need to carry in our pocket, our brain pocket, to remember who we are, what we did or what we do, and can we or how do we help in this situation.
Yep.
And to me, it's more important if I can get something started and just keep the situation calm until one of the three branches come. It's probably two. Um,
Hey, incident stabilization is one of the most important things.
exactly, exactly. And matter of fact, when I did one right around the corner from my home, coming out of a big box store, the woman in front of me didn't stop at the going out to the southbound side of the road. She didn't want to turn right. And she blew through the stop sign. And a young lady driving her car southbound hit her right in, T-boned her. Right. But it
Mm.
wasn't the woman coming down the south line. It was the one who went through the stop sign right in front of me. I was behind her. And that's what she pulled out without looking. And that's when she got T-boned. And that's when
Yeah.
I went into the thing, threw on my lights, took out my vest, put on my vest, my gear, my jump bag and everything and started working. And then the first person on board was a local police officer. And he saw me wearing the vest. He goes, "Are you still on the job?" I said, no, no, but help me get the rest of them here. I said, "Yeah, you need fire and EMS." I said, "Yeah, please, fire and EMS." I think I'd already said that on the phone too when I called in the dispatch. But he said, one of the guys from the rescue said, "It's a damn good thing you knew what to do for her, because she said that She said, I'm holding her neck behind her. And she goes, I gotta be late for driving the bus, school bus. I said, sweetheart, you're not driving a school bus this afternoon. I can tell you that. You're going to take a little ride in an ambulance. You're going to be checked out at the hospital because for you to drive and your family, we want you all safe.
Yeah,
And so we have to verify that you're going to be safe before we let you go out around the town. And one of the medics said to me, he says, "How did you know all that stuff?" I said, "Because I'm no different than you are. I'm just older. You know, that's it." And he says, "I never thought of it that way." But it's, and I think the vast majority, and maybe not as much with career departments, but I know in volunteer or mixed departments that is something that people care about and that they want to be ready to help.
yeah,
And I know my two departments that I served in, uh, there were guys just like me. As a matter of fact, I learned from them what to do and what to have on
right.
board. And I don't regret it. Yeah, I spent a few bucks to get it all set up, and then I spent a little more to replenish stuff that had gone out of date and stuff. But to me, it's incumbent that we share, those of us who came before, share our knowledge so that the firefighters and the law enforcement officers and our EMS brothers and sisters have an idea that there are other people who can be there to help, not just the guy who wants to be a hero, but who's there as uh, if he was wearing that, he went from wearing street clothes to all of a sudden you could see him, picture that man or woman in a uniform helping with that patient or that situation with you. And
Right,
that I think is important to remember who we are and why we took the oath.
for sure.
So, any other little surprises coming up that some people may not know about?
Um, yeah, actually, a couple quick hitters. We won't go down the rabbit hole too far. But I noticed recently, as I've been, going through and refreshing my presentation since I rebranded it, and I decided to reformat the whole PowerPoint. I was going through my section on solar energy and started realizing some things that were maybe a little outdated and started getting concerned. And I reached out to a gentleman by the name of Michael Benson for some input, and Michael is just an absolute stellar individual. Uh, he's my personal SME when it comes to all things uh, solar, EV, battery energy storage systems. And I always love talking to Michael because every time we talk, he enlightens me on some new technology or system that's out there. Um, and he's, like I said, he's really good. They have his company. I don't know if they ever got the patent. They were patent pending on a municipal microgrid energy system, which is, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Like he's a retired fire chief and I believe a degreed electrical engineer. So, you know, for me and him to talk is great. So I reached out to him for some feedback, and when it comes to a lot of this alternative energy, either for homes or for vehicles, it's been a big topic of conversation, especially with the EVs the last few years, and everybody's, really scared about the EV fires. But I, I'm wondering how much of it's a little bit of overreaction. You can't think of every battery, every lithium battery is the same. There's many different types out there that react differently. One of the great points Michael made to me was, you have a lithium battery in your portable radio that you're carrying in the fires. Why is that one safe and the other one's bad? So technology is getting better. You have to understand the types of batteries that are out there, where you're going to find them, and how to deal with them. Um, you know, EV chargers and systems have been getting more safer as
Yeah.
as the years go. And I'm not saying you totally discount them, but things are getting better. But even if new things are good, it doesn't mean legacy things are. So that's something to consider. It's a lot of and that applies a lot to solar energy. Over years we've developed codes around like walkways on roofs so you can access it versus back in the day they could cover every square inch of a roof with a panel, which made our life tougher. Uh, a lot of the newer panels have microinverters at the panels, so
Yes.
you're isolating that DC source at the panel itself and not down it, next to the disconnects at the side of the house where you might have cable running through the attic that remains charged because it's DC side.
Let me interrupt you at that moment, please. We had 42 panels on our roof of this
Yep.
house since 2019. The insurance company said that we had our roof, most recent roof, was put on in 2004. We had no issues with it, not a drip anywhere in the house, around the house, anything like that. No problem. But we had to get them, and those were the ones that have the microinverter on every panel. Okay, we had to take them off because we had to get the roof changed, and so they charged $2,000 to take the panels off, and it would have been another $2,000 to put them back up again.
Oof.
So we sadly we had to give them up. I still have to pay the lien off, um, but we took them off. And when the guy who was taking it off, came out to see how their work was going. He showed me the electrical box, and there had been a fire or enough heat to carbonize stuff in that power box that we never knew that could
Oh
have.
wow.
Yeah, and I have the box in the garage, and I'm trying to find a, uh, law office that would handle against this company that we got our stuff from.
Hmm.
And of course, the whole thing was a scam as well because they told us the price was much lower, and then we used the multiplication for 42 things. It was going to be a nice low number. Well, then I had to do this, and we had to do this, and we have to do this and that. And I got a hold of them because were working my neighbor right next door. So that's something. If you do have solar panels on your roof, okay, on your roof, then make sure the electric box is clear and clean and does not show any sign of high heat, any blackening, browning of wires, or even we had bolts that actually were marked up from the heat from
Wow.
this card. Yeah. So if you do have solar panels on your home, please, please, please be careful. Check with them. Um, they all required uh, electrical inspections by the city when we put them on. And hopefully most other cities do that. Now, if you're building your own ones that are going to lay on your backyard on a tilt for the sun, that's totally different. But when it's attached to your house, then you need to know that those microinverters are right on the lower left corner as you look at a panel. On every panel has its own. Then they're wired together. Um, but when we saw that box, I was just stupefied. I had
Wow.
no idea in my house, and I'm Mr. Firefighter. I don't even know my own house that my power box for the solar panels was aflame at some point.
Hmm.
So if you have panels, please take a moment to check them. If you don't know enough about them, that's okay. You can find reputable companies that will look and come out and check them for you. But please don't forget to check them because we only bought ours in 2019. So this wasn't, it's just, a few years ago for us. But
Yeah.
now it turned our whole world upside down. Our energy bill when we had the panels averaged around anywhere between 45 and 55, even during the hottest summers and stuff like that. Our first bill from FPL, Florida Power and Light, after we had them removed, was 250 something.
Ouch.
Yeah. So, and that was during a real cold spell that we had. It was right after that. So we had to run the heat in the house because these houses in Florida, this deep in Florida, aren't insulated really that much, other than just the attic, not
Right.
down, not in the walls and stuff like that. So my bedroom where I sleep is 3 degrees colder than the rest of the house, and my bedroom abuts with this office, my office here, and so these two rooms are always at least 3 degrees lower than the rest of the house. So it's something that you don't have to be a firefighter to fix. You don't have to be a police officer. You don't have to be a paramedic or an EMT. Find somebody in your community who works on solar panels and have them come by and check your electrical system. Even if you have to pay $50, $60, ask me, is that an investment that you want to do to keep you home and keep you and your family safe?
Yeah. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. EJ, again, I can't thank you enough. You jumped in when I just popped up the idea last week, and I'm so glad you accepted the invitation.
Oh,
Again, you
that
probably one of my longest and oldest fan, and then from fan to friend, and close to family. Because
for
we
sure.
always, our first conversations when we first call each other is the family questions. How are the
Yep.
kids, stuff like that. And I do it, you do it. It's just a natural connection that we have, and that's, to me, that's the best part, to having that connection.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm honored to be able to come back and talk with you. I always enjoy our conversations are always good. This format may be, a little more formal, but still a lot of fun. So I really appreciate the chance again. Um, your friendship has been long and unwavering, and you've been one of my biggest supporters since before this even started because you were the one that kind of kicked me in the butt to get it going. So means a lot.
Yep, yep. We worked together on the manual that you wrote, and it was, I enjoyed doing that because I was very comfortable.
Yeah.
That's the key. If you had asked me for a chemical combination of something, I'm not your guy. I only got a C plus in chemistry, AP chemistry in sophomore in high school. But no, when it comes to this kind of stuff, you're the man that I turn to.
I appreciate that.
And even though the podcast may be ending in a couple of months, our friendship will not.
No, for sure.
Yeah. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Five Alarm Task Force with our guest, EJ Henninger. We hope you learned a little about our discussions today as well. Remember, our book will be coming out. Just follow us on social media, and we'll have it announced, and we'll put it on the website as well. It'll be the same name, Five Alarm Task Force Corp, because we're going to take the most of the money that comes in from book sales. We're going to be giving it to burn charities, of course, the NFFF, close to all of our hearts, and some other charitable organizations that help care for firefighters, even our brothers and sisters who we lost in 9/11. So until next time, keep an eye on what's going on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I don't even know if I think I have a Facebook someplace. But stay tuned. There's still some more to come. Until next time, thank you for tuning in. Our sincere thanks to EJ Henninger for spending some time with us today and teaching us a few things that most of us, even those you who are still working, and me, an old retired old fart. Um, we still need to know some of this stuff today. So thanks for tuning in. We wish you all the best. Stay safe and stay well. And let's remember to take care of each other. Bye bye now.